So this is a joke about blacks. I signed my dog up for welfare. Do you think he's eligible? He's black, lazy, and has no friggin' idea who his daddy is. This and hundreds of other racist jokes about Hispanics, Asians, and Muslims were circulated in work emails, on paid time, by Springfield City operations employees. The local newspaper, the Register Guard, referred to these emails as degrading and obscene. A disgruntled city employee submitted the emails to then city manager Gino Grimaldi, who refused to enforce the city policies regarding discrimination and public email use. The whistleblower then turned the emails over to local media. Once exposed by the media, Grimaldi described the emails as offensive and disturbing. He'd known about the emails since February 2010. The media reported this in April. Grimaldi distanced himself from the discrimination by stating, "Some people did not follow the policies that were in place, and there was a failure to adequately supervise those people." But as the city manager, Grimaldi was the top supervisor in Springfield, a municipality famous for its systemic racism and corruption. Among the city employees who were involved with the discriminatory emails were Operations Director Brian Conlon. Over the next several years, his employees would file multiple complaints about Conlon and other operations managers for discrimination and illegal retaliation. These complaints were suppressed by the HR director, Chaim Hertz, and the city managers, Neil Adati and Nancy Newt. City leaders would eventually reward Conlon for his racism by promoting him to director of operations and make him a member of the city's executive team, thereby increasing his status, pay, and influence over city decisions. I was a city employee for 10 years. The following is my experience of how the city leaders kept this discrimination and corruption concealed from the public with secrets, lies, and illegal retaliation. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I'm James with Community Matters, PNW, and it is Christmas Day, December 25th, 2024. I'm shooting this episode from City Hall in Springfield, Oregon, on this rainy Christmas day. Wikipedia defines systemic and institutional racism as follows. Institutional racism, also known as systemic racism, is a form of institutional discrimination based on race or ethnic group and can include policies and practices that exist throughout a whole society or organization that result in and support a continued unfair advantage to some people and unfair or harmful treatment to others. It manifests as discrimination in areas such as criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, and education and political representation. Currently, the mayor and all members of the Springfield City Council are white. The city manager and assistant city manager are white. The city attorney is white. The HR director is white. The chief and deputy chief of police are white. All city department heads are white. This is not an accident. These city operations employees were specifically named in the circulation of racist emails. Employee Todd Thompson, Supervisor Stacy Kentai, and Division Head Brian Conlon. In a news article about the blatant discrimination, Conlon was quoted in an email as being a participant. "Hey guys, please use discretion and take this one offline. This is public record." Conlon had known about the blatant racism for a long time and was complicit with it. Grimaldi threw Conlon under the bus by telling the KVAL reporter, "That's totally unacceptable. That's not what a supervisor in this organization should be doing." Grimaldi told the reporter that Conlon should have put a stop to this behavior, but Grimaldi was Conlon's superior at the time. I would later report discrimination and retaliation in the operations division to Grimaldi just 8 years later in 2018. I submitted specific documented examples of how Conlon and manager Ben Gibson fabricated disciplinary actions against me to keep me quiet. After the email scandal went public, manager Kentai was the only employee terminated as a result. When I was hired into the operations division, I was one of only 3 ethnic minorities who worked in a division of over 40 employees. My operations coworkers would describe Kentai as being Conlon's protege. The two were described as close friends who golfed and attended church together. Kentai was described as receiving special leadership grooming as Conlon's favorite. Coworkers would tell me that after the scandal hit, Conlon sacrificed Kentai to protect his own career. Kentai would shortly use his privilege to secure a management position with Lane County. Operations employee Todd Thompson's career was spared by his union, AFSCME. Conlon also rewarded Thompson's discrimination by promoting him to a position called encroachments, which included more pay and a desk away from his resentful coworkers. Director Conlon would further protect Thompson from his resentful coworkers by reclassifying his position from AFSCME to the SEIU union. It didn't matter, since Thompson would be dead weight to SEIU also. After AFSCME saved Thompson's career, he'd later decide that unions weren't convenient to his political values and withdrew his membership entirely. I was hired about a year after the email scandal. Conlon and his management team doubled down on their coercion and retaliation tactics to prevent other employee complaints, but the discrimination and toxicity among management and the crew continued to fester. Over the next decade, I'd work for Director Conlon and observe how he used lies, manipulation tactics, and coercion to get what he wanted. I believe his greatest talent is his ability to be a social chameleon. My coworkers described him as having the personality of a car salesman or a politician. As I began training in operations, I started getting to know my coworkers, including Thompson. Todd often said insulting things about ethnic minorities, women, and the LGBTQ. I'd tell him that I didn't approve of his views, as the city diversity training instructed me to do. My disapproval of Todd's discrimination would get back to Director Conlon, who'd confront me about it in private. These candid talks started with Conlon feeling sorry for Thompson and defending him. Later, Conlon would start threatening me with my career. He always made sure that there were no witnesses within hearing distance when he did this. He used a lot of predatory tactics like this and escalated the threats and retaliation over the years against me and other employees that he targeted. After the email scandal, the Springfield City Council adopted a goal to foster an environment that values diversity and inclusion. In another news article, city councilors were quoted as saying the messages that circulated for more than a year among operations staff members and managers were appalling and despicable. Neil Adati, a city public relations professional at the time, would facilitate the project of creating a city diversity committee to advise the city manager on equity issues. Ladati would use this to help him advance into the assistant city manager position. In 2016, the City Diversity Committee was formed. I applied and was accepted. The next city manager, Nancy Newton, the assistant city manager, Neil Adati, and HR director, Chaim Hertz, would become the city advisors and attend the monthly meetings. After I joined the diversity committee and started getting involved in equity projects, operations director Conlon and his manager, Ben Gibson, increased the retaliation and fabricated disciplinary actions. On April 13th, 2020, I reported discrimination to other city diversity committee members and included then interim city manager and current city attorney Mary Bridget Smith, HR director Chaim Hertz, and assistant city manager Neil Ladati. Director Conlon and the hiring manager Gibson refused to hire qualified ethnic minority applicants and women. I was trying to get diversity committee representation on the operations interview panel. As a result of my legally protected reporting, Gibson invited a diversity committee member onto the panel at the last minute. Conlon and Gibson retaliated against me for this. Reporting discrimination and other illegal employment practices is supposed to be protected by state and federal whistleblowing laws. Despite this, Conlon and Gibson wrapped up retaliatory disciplinary investigations against me with falsified documents. Lawsuits and local media reports were exposing discrimination and retaliation by management in the city police department also. Managers from the city police and the operations departments worked with the same HR director, city managers, and city attorneys. These city executives knew what was going on the entire time in both departments. 2018, I filed a union grievance complaint against Conlon and Gibson for discrimination and retaliation. I wrote a letter that described, in detail, multiple examples of discrimination and illegal retaliation from management. This complaint process involved multiple steps and required months to resolve. The current city attorney, Mary Bridget Smith, the current HR director, Chaim Hertz, and the previous city manager, Gino Grimaldi, were all part of this complaint process. All three had known about the illicit tactics and operations since 2018. Between all of the multiple city executives involved, I estimated that suppression efforts like this have required many hundreds of paid hours at their six-figure incomes. Finally, after months of stress and frustration, my complaint process resulted in a meeting with the city manager and his large entourage in a conference room at City Hall. Grimaldi finally agreed to drop all of the fake disciplinary actions created by Conlin and Gibson from my employee file. But this resolution was temporary. Conlin and Gibson would resume their retaliation later without intervention from the next city manager, Nancy Newton. This is one way corrupt institutions suppress attempts to address their systemic failures. They predicted that I'd give up during the complaint process and allow Conlin and Gibson to continue lying to discredit and silence me with fear. Most employees who experience this type of corruption do stay quiet until they give up and resign. Over the years, many of my coworkers in Springfield resigned or retired early because HR and the city managers silenced them by abusing and twisting city policies and procedures. For every Springfield city employee who finally filed a lawsuit or went to the media, I estimate that there were scores more who were suffocated by the corrupt managers and executives. The city leaders refused to intervene because they didn't want the public to find out. If and when a scandal does eventually leak its way to the public, city executives and councilors know that it's just a matter of time before the public forgets again and business carries on as usual. They're happy to help the public forget by using social media and large, publicly funded meetings that are mostly attended by city employees and other local politicians. On September 16, 2021, a group of over a dozen operations employees, accompanied by our union representative, held a meeting with HR Director Chaim Hertz in the employee lunchroom. My coworkers described the illegal retaliation by operations manager Brian Barnett against our employee union president and steward, Bob. Part of Bob's role as a steward was to represent employees during disciplinary investigations. Operations management was using illicit tactics and didn't want the interference from the union, so they started multiple disciplinary investigations against Bob to control him with fear. The steward's role is supposed to be protected by federal and state employment law, and retaliation against protected activities is illegal. During this meeting, Bob broke down and started sobbing. It was heart-wrenching to see an adult bullied into crying in front of his crew. 2 months later, operations employees and our union rep again met with the HR director in private. Hertz acknowledged to her that he knew about the disciplinary investigations, but was not directly involved. He claimed that he was only advising operations managers, and the only way to get an internal investigation would be to go over his head. This meant going directly to the assistant city manager, Neil Adati, or the city manager, Nancy Newton. On January 31st, 2022, our employee union president, vice president, and AFSCME rep met with the assistant city manager, Neil Adati. They described the discrimination and retaliation all over again. Ladati refused to intervene decisively. Director Conlin and Manager Gibson continued to retaliate against me for my work on the city's diversity committee. During private union meetings, my coworkers complained about how Manager Gibson would corner them in his office and pressure quotes from them that he'd document and manipulate to justify his investigations. On December 17, 2021, I included City Manager Nancy Newton in my email response to Gibson's disciplinary investigation. This email illustrated the exact nature of Gibson's retaliation. The city has an open door policy to encourage transparency and accountability and prevent corruption. Newton replied 2 weeks later with, "I did not open or review the attached documents as it would not be appropriate to do so." I also verbally informed her about the retaliation during City Diversity Committee meetings. Newton knew exactly what Conlin and Gibson were doing and was complicit. She wanted to use the plausible deniability tactic that lying bureaucrats use when they know they're cheating the system. After trying for many years to address the discrimination and corruption in Operations Division through the city's prescribed procedures, I finally realized that they were all in on it. They all knew, they were all trying to conceal it from the public. After struggling to address the corruption their way, I finally hired an employment attorney and filed a tort notice to Mayor Sean Van Gordon and City Attorney Mary Bridget Smith. This legal notice, again, described the discrimination and retaliation used over the years by operations management. By this point, the mayor and city council formally knew about the corruption that was still taking place in the operations division since the 2010 email scandal. The city council is responsible for making sure the city manager and the city attorney are doing their jobs. So problem solved, right? No. The mayor and city council have known about this for many years and have been complicit with the discrimination and corruption. They know that they've been lied to by the city manager and the city attorney. Anybody with access to the local news here knows about the corruption. The same diversity committee that the all-white city council commissioned as a solution to the exposed systemic racism in our city government was recently dissolved. All BIPOC diversity committee leaders have been separated from the city that employed them. 2 diversity committee leaders resigned after complaining of discrimination from management, including myself. One BIPOC diversity committee leader was targeted after complaining of discrimination and retaliation from his manager, Nathan Bell. The committee advisors, Newton, Ladati, and Hertz, knew this and concealed it from the city council and the public. The city council and mayor know that the city managers and HR director are responsible. I emailed them and explained this to them. In the end, the leadership at the very top of city government turned out to be complicit with the systemic racism in Springfield. They all know, and they all continue to put on a facade for the public. Springfield's white mayor and all-white city council continue to praise and celebrate Director Brian Conlon's career advancement, despite his discrimination and illegal retaliation tactics having been documented multiple times. Everyone in city council knows about management's corruption in the city council division, just like they knew about the corruption in the city police department for many years while supporting the previous chief. The mayor and city council know about the corruption. Both city manager and the assistant city manager have known. The city attorney knew. The HR director was directly involved with the corruption. All of the white managers contribute to protecting the power and control of white dominance in Springfield's government with lies. Observe how the white city council and mayor contributes to the lies as they put on a performance for the public. In the case of the city of Springfield, the taxpayers have been footing the bill over the years for probably millions of dollars in unnecessary, biased, third-party investigations, lawsuit settlements, and paid work hours for unscrupulous city executives as they fabricated loopholes in the system instead of holding managers accountable for their actions. Government corruption and discrimination can only be corrected with transparency and citizen intervention. It takes a combination of transparency and activism in the form of education, commentary, policy reform, public protests, and sometimes legal action to create deep government change. If we want transparency and accountability in our government, it's up to us. Let your officials know you refuse to be lied to. We need to force the liars and cheats out of power when they're caught. We have to create the communities that we want to live in. This is James with Community Matters PNW. Thank you for listening to my story.